see.
Here we go. Hello, everyone. Friday is here. A lot to talk about today. You want to stick around with us? Finally, Friday is about to begin. Finally, Friday is being brought to you this week by Major Spoilers VIP and Patreon members from around the world. You can show your support for everything we do by pointing your browser to patreon.com/Major Spoilers. Well, hello, everyone. It is Friday. Finally, Friday. The end of a long week. I know for my youngest, he is super excited because he has a four-day weekend ahead of him. Don't ask, don't tell. It's labeled as parent-teacher conferences, and yet all the parent-teacher conference stuff was last week, so I don't know. I'm so glad that so many of you are in the chat today. Lagnus is there. The one J. Michael T is there. Nightbot is there. Hello, Nightbot. If you would, just everybody shout out your names. Let us know that you are alive. One of the things that we have been doing over the last couple of months is One Question Friday, where you guys use the Major Spoilers Discord, and you ask one question, and depending on who has the best question, we'll do a deep dive into that one question for the entire episode. And I found there were several good questions this week, but I think this one from Jim Buffett, because it's spooky season. Jim Buffett says, can a new creator make a livable wage in today's comic book industry? This applies to both writers and artists. If so, how much of a workload would they need to take on? If not, how do they augment their income? And I think this is a great question. I'm not a comic book professional, but we're talking about starting up a business in the creative arts, something I kind of know a little bit about. But in order to kind of take a deep dive into this, we need to ask a couple of questions. We need to clarify a couple of questions. The first one is livable wage in today's comic book industry. Let's take a crack at that one first. First of all, what's a livable wage? How much, and this is going to vary from location to location, city to city, state to state, et cetera, et cetera. What it costs to live where I'm at, the cost of living is much, much lower than living in Los Angeles or living in New York or even living in Atlanta. Cost of living is just so much different. So one thing that you can do if you're trying to figure out what your livable wage is do a cost of living calculator, and they can tell you what the cost would be in every place that you're in. So that's the first thing that has to be answered. And if you're just like, well, all I need is $30,000 or all I need is $45,000, that's going to change the variables. But I think for the purposes of this discussion today, we're going to use a number that studies have shown are where people are happiest. Now, I know that the number is not going to be right for you or for me or for whoever, but there's this point where money, they say money can't buy happiness. They've actually determined that $75,000 a year is that point where if you're making $75,000 a year, you're happy. I'm not saying that all of your bills are being paid. I'm not saying that you're having a livable wage, but let's just hit that happiness marker of $75,000 a year. So that's kind of going to be our first target point in this question. This applies to both writers and artists. Okay, so now we've got two people that need to make $75,000 a year. Okay, now we're going to go into, oh man, is this not going to show up? I was told that this was going to work and it was going to show up today. Come on, you. Sometimes I hate OBS and Elgato and all of the funny things that they claim is going to work. All right, let's see if we can get this to function correctly. We'll go up to there, and we'll go back down to there. There we go. Oh, did it go away? We're going to do Stephen Math Time. Stephen Math Time to help us figure out if you can make a livable wage. Oh, did it just go away again? It did. I think there's a short in this thing. Let's try this one more time. I'm going to turn that off. We're going to turn that on. We're going to come back. There we go. All right. So Stephen Math Time. This is Stephen Math. I'm no way saying that these are the actual numbers or the actual figures that, what is that? 100 and times 2 is 150,000 is what our target is in this case. I know it says 150 poo, it looks like. Deso poo. Deso poo. So let's say because we're dealing with a writer and an artist, and they each want to make $75,000 a year, and they want to make a wage. Let's say that's our target number that we have to hit. The other thing that you have to keep in mind is that me, Steven Schleicher, it doesn't matter if I'm a wonderful writer or not, the chances of me just going up to DC Comics or Image Comics a little bit different, but DC Comics or Marvel Comics, knocking on the door and say, hello, Mr. DC, hello, Mr. Marvel, I would like to write comic books for you. Please give me $75,000 to do that. Is not feasible. It's not reality. Okay. So that means that if you want to get up to a Marvel or a DC level, you're going to have to work your way up, and working your way up takes time. So let's start at 0 and just kind of figure out how you might be able to make $150,000 between the two of you over the course of the year. So the first thing is look at the cost of a comic book. Okay. So if we look at a cost of a comic book, and you can go online and you're going to find all sorts of different numbers. I have seen anywhere from $200 to $500 per finished page. And that includes the art and the writer and all of these things. Cover might cost you $1,000 if you're going to go that route. So if we are going, let's see if we can get this to pop up. There we go. Let's just do $500. Let's just take the high end of this. Let's say that it costs $500 per page to complete. And let's say you're going to do a 22-page comic book. That's a lot. Okay. $500 at 22 pages is going to equal, if I've got this right, 500 times 22 is $11,000 just for the cost of your comic book. Okay. So if you got $11,000 for the cost of your comic book, and let's say that you are going to sell this for the average price of $4, $3.99. Okay, so we're going to divide that by 4, and we get divide by 4, and that leaves us 2,750 issues that we need to sell in order to break even. Now, this is interesting because we have often heard through the grapevine over the years that if a comic is not making at least 3,000, selling 3,000 copies a month, it's on the verge of being canceled. So that kind of plays back into this theory, this idea of, $500 per page. Everybody following me with me so far? Does this make sense? So we have to sell 2,500 copies to clear $11,000. Okay, and we still haven't made anything yet. All right, so that's just breaking even. That's just breaking even. We haven't even made money yet. So that means if we want to make money on our comic, we have to sell more than 2,750 copies. Let's say that we could sell 5,000 copies. Okay, so we're back here on Stephen Math. Let's say that we can sell 5,000 copies at, at $4 a piece. That is $20,000 that we make. Simple math there. Minus the $11,000 that it costs to make the comic book. And when we do the math, we have $9,000 left. We're going to split that between the writer and the artist. So each person is making $4,500 an issue. Okay? If we've done our math right. Now, if we know that we need to make $75,000 in a year, we need to take 75,000 divided by, 75,000 and divide that by 4,500. And that means we need to release in a year 16 comics. So again, if we're just doing this ourselves, that means we have to release more than a comic a month, which is probably not realistic. So that means if we're just even going by on a monthly basis, this number, this $4,500, needs to go up to probably somewhere around $6,000, $7,000. So now we're looking at $7,000 that we have to clear $14,000. Okay. Just so we can split that. Add on the $11,000 on top of that. Now we're at $25,000 that we need to make per comic, which now means, are we really needing to sell somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 comics per issue? Just so we can hit that target number. And again, we're hitting a pretty high number, $75,000. 50,000 is probably would have been a lot more reasonable to achieve. But if we're going by the happiness number, that's 75,000. We got to sell 6,000 issues. Okay, we got to sell 6,000 issues. You guys might want to go and look at some of the numbers on ICV2 or Comicron and look and see like what Archie sells. Go and look and see what others sell. And there's a lot of them that $3,500 is pretty okay. You go and you look at some smaller places and maybe $1,500 is all they're selling in the top 300 comics. And that's just the top 300 comics. That's not talking about you brand new guy who just woke up one day and said, hey, my friend and I are going to create comic books and we're going to make $75,000 a year each. So Blue Front says, let's bring this up really quick. Since we're talking about money, let's bring this up. Uh-oh, where'd my face go? My face isn't there anymore. Olin says, hey, Steven, I'm not trying to drop off major spoilers, but I hit a rough patch and I'm out of work due to surgery. I'm very sorry for that. I hope your surgery was something that was planned and not something not planned. Like, I hope you didn't like fall off a ladder or something and break 32 ribs. I hope that wasn't what happened. I hope this was like, yeah, I got to go in and have a thing removed. And that's the reason why this is covered. I'm very sorry that you're not, that you're in a bad spot. I totally understand. No problem. Okay. If you got to drop off, that's fine. We understand. Everything is tight. We hope that someday you come back though, very soon. Lagnus says there's a fair amount of comic writers, artists making a living off it in the Nordic countries with a much smaller market, often selling comic strips to magazines, comic albums, and so on. So we're going to get to that in just a moment. All right. Next thing that we need to figure out is you're not just going to offer up a new comic book and say, hey, I'm going to instantly attract 6,000 readers. That ain't going to happen. In order to sell somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,000 copies a month, we need to use the 3% of 3% rule. Okay. So the 3% of 3% rule basically says whatever your audience size is, 3% of those people are actually going to click on something, open up a previews magazine and say, oh, I see that there is a new comic book from two people that I know, or there's a new comic book from two people I've never known or heard of, but I guess they're following you, so they're a fan. 3% of the people are going to see that, and then 3% of the people are going to click on buy the comic through Comixology or tell their local comic shop, hey, buy this, order this comic for me. I'm going to buy it. Okay. That's in an ideal world. So let's make this math a little bit easier and just go 5%. So in order to sell 6,000 copies, we need to attract, what is that? 30,000. If this is 5%, if that's 5%, we need to attract 30,000 people, meaning we need to have 30,000 followers or fans or whatever of our work, because this is the $500,000 comic readers. If we can get 5% of those, that's more like less than 10%, but let's say we can get 5% of those to look at our piece, and then 5% of those to actually buy our comic, then that's really good. But the problem is we need to have the eyeballs of 500,000 people in order to work our way down there. And again, this is Steven math. This is stuff that I'm basing it off of podcasting and online advertising, etc., which works kind of the same way. Not exactly the same way, but kind of the same way. So where are we going to get the attention of 50,000 people? Well, maybe we take our comic book and we say, oh, you know what? We're going to eventually work to a comic book. You could go to Kickstarter, but you better have a darn good social presence, because a lot of what makes Kickstarter successful is having a following of people that you can reach out to. Okay. So that's the first thing. Let's push that aside for just a little bit and say, hey, that's a good idea. We'll come back to that later. Maybe what you do is you say, doesn't cost me anything to create a free Squarespace or a Squarespace site, or, a free website. So let's create a webcomic and let's put it out there, and let's hustle every day of our lives to get a new page up every day. And even for comic strips, even for longtime comic creators, doing a strip a day is a lot. So a page a day is a lot. Now, again, this is going to go into who does more work, writer or an artist. I don't care. You're both working on this together. You're both doing equal work. Okay? But you're going to have to bust to do that every day. Or let's say you do it every other day. Let's say you do 3 days a week, and then at the end of the month, you have a comic book and a half ready to go. You have a comic book and a half of issue done. Okay. What is that? 3 times 4. No, I'm sorry. That's half of a comic book done each month if you do 3 times a week. So that means it's going to be 2 months to do a full issue kind of stuff. But you're going to have to bust every day for at least a year to start to get followers. Now, maybe you could do it as little as 3 months, but you're going to have to be out there on Twitter, on Snapchat, on a TikTok. I don't know how to spell TikTok. There we go. On Instagram. Just pushing to get your followers, to build up an audience of people who are rabid for your work. And then after a year of building stuff up, or maybe after 2 years of building stuff up, now you can go and see what your follower count is. Now maybe you do a Kickstarter for a print version. Now maybe you go a trade collection that you are going to print and sell. But so far, you haven't made any money from this on this webcomic. So how then are you going to make money off of this webcomic? So that you can hopefully then catch the attention of a publisher who wants to work with you to get your webcomic featured on Dark Horse or Image Comics or Vault or Scout or whoever it may be. Well, there's a lot of ways that you could do that. First of all, ads on your webcomic. You're not going to make a lot of money, Okay? Hardly going to make any money off of that. Maybe $100 a month. Maybe more. It depends on how popular your comic is. You can sell merchandise, but remember, merchandise comes with a cost, and you can't launch a webcomic and expect people to want to buy your merchandise. The first thing that has to happen is you have to draw in the audience and then sell them the product. So build the audience, then the money comes. So even with merchandise, for each t-shirt sale, depending on who you're going through and what your profit margin is, you're making maybe $5 per shirt. Okay. You can go to Patreon. But again, you need to have followers for that, and think about however many follows you have, 5% or 5% or 3% or 3% or 5%, 1%, however you want to calculate that down. And that will give you some money. And if you do it right, and there's some really good podcasters out there, the Comic Lab podcast, I think, does a really good job of talking about how to make a living through comics. And I think they break things down very, very easily. But you're not, this is going to be small change, small potatoes for the first couple of years. So this does bring us into this weird, sad place of asking the question, how much of a workload would they need to take on? If not, how do they augment their income? And, get a second job, get a third job. I was thinking about this question this week. And since I started into the workforce over, what is it, years ago, I've always had more than one job. I've had a main job, whether that is teaching or writing or whatever. And then I've always had side hustles, doing video production work, side writing, side projects, major spoilers, other projects that I'm working on. I've always had at least two jobs going on. And this is not uncommon for a lot of people. And again, here in the United States, and I understand Lagnus and others who may be overseas, that there's a different cost of living. Some countries have a UBI system in there that allows you to still have cost of living while pursuing creative goals. I'm a big fan of UBI, for those of you that are asking. And you're going to probably have a second job, and the comics are going to be your side hustle. Your comics are going to be the thing that you work, in the evening on. So you're going to go and do your day job, 9 to 5 or whatever it is. You're going to come home. You're going to spend a couple of hours with your family, eating food, hanging out with your friends, whatever. And then from 7 until 10 o'clock, you're going to side hustle. You're going to be working on your webcomic and working on ways to get it to print and working on ways of getting that out into writers and publishers to see if they're interested in accepting your comic. And it's going to take a couple of years. In fact, you might be surprised. If you were to go and ask who you might consider successful comic book creators today, how long did it take you to become a success? And most of them are going to say between 10 and 20 years. And so this phrase, it took 10 years to become an overnight success, goes all the way back to the 1930s when, and I forget who the actual quote comes from, but he was a very famous radio personality. And he was the talk of the town. Everybody loved him. And somebody asked him, well, you're suddenly an overnight success on the radio. How did you, how long did it take? And he's like, no, it took me like 10 years because he was a vaudevillian and he had to go from town to town, and he had to go on the routes to go and perform and to get himself known so that people knew his name and build his credibility up. So that when someone gave him a chance to be on the radio for the first time, he was able to get right into that slot. And then he worked his way up to this big national radio show where everybody knew him. And suddenly they're like, who is this guy? He's an overnight success. My guess is when you look at people who you see as overnight successes, what you're not seeing is the time that they put into it. Look at Mr. Beast, for example. People are like, Mr. Beast came out of nowhere and he's making $1 billion on YouTube. Yeah, but it took him like 8 years to get where he's at now, and probably 10 years to get where he's at now. And you can go back and see some of those early Mr. Beast stuff. He will share them sometimes if they're not online, or he will talk about them where he's just like, I was living in a house with 4 of my friends, or he was living at home and he had 4 friends, and every day he would just get up and figure out the YouTube algorithm and content create, figure out how the algorithm worked, what it rewarded, what it didn't. And he would communicate with all of his friends, and then the friends would talk with one another until finally they're like, this is what works. And then start, not start, but continue to build content that fed that algorithm/audience. So, Agnes says, my friend kickstarts his own comics. His first issue was a small loss. Now he's making a very small amount of money, but he's not looking to live off of it. But now his comic has been picked up by the Phantom, and he's hired to write for the Phantom too. Still not a quit your day job thing, but darn, it's cool. He has worked really, really hard to go from nothing to this. You're right. You're absolutely right. Good for him. And he took a loss on that. You guys should talk to Ashley. Ashley and Jason should do a workshop on launching successful Kickstarters, because they've done it. Because there's a lot of hidden things inside of Kickstarters where if you're not paying attention, you can quickly lose your shirt. I guess what I'm saying is, if you're willing to put in the time, if you're willing to have a side job or 2 or 3, and you're still dedicated to working in the comics industry, yes, you can do it. But you're not going to go and start writing for Batman tomorrow. That's just not going to happen. You're not going to go and write Captain America tomorrow. You're not going to go out and write. You're not going to write for Disney Studios tomorrow. You have to work at it, and it takes time to do that. And so you have to set some time aside to dedicate yourself to your art and your craft. And eventually you'll build it up. But one of the things you can do is just start working backwards from your target goal of what is your cost of living. Work backwards to figure out how much do you have to make per month. And then start working and figuring out all the ways that you can work on your comic book so that it makes money for you. And the key here is, even as a podcaster, even as someone who runs Major Spoilers makes money from multiple different avenues. So here's the other thing that you have to think about. I kind of showed it here. If we have a stool that you sit on, you need at least 3 legs of that stool to have a stable seat so that you don't fall over. Okay. Ideally, you'd have 4 legs or more, but you need a minimum of 3 just to have stable. And why do you need a minimum of 3? Well, if one of these legs gets taken away, Patreon changes the way that it processes stuff. Or as you saw years ago with PayPal, they suddenly increased their processing fees, which actually was losing us money. So we had to kind of shift away from PayPal as a way of making money. If one of those legs goes away, we still have 3 legs to sit on and be stable. Back in 2013, we lost an advertiser who was paying us $20,000 a year. Down to 2 legs. Things are very shaky here. Yes, you can sit, but you're going to be balancing quite a bit to make sure that everything works. And if one of those other legs goes out, or if both legs goes out, that's it. It's over. So you need to figure out how you're going to support that stool, support that project that you're working on, and figure out different ways that you can monetize that. I think the one J. Michael T says it best in the chat. There are really no ways. Let's see if we can bring this up. There's really no shortcuts, unfortunately. That's right. There are no shortcuts. There are no get-rich-quick schemes. There's nobody out there who can say, I can make you go viral, so don't believe that stuff. What you just need to do is produce good content, quality content, and you have to do it consistently. And you have to do it with love and care and all of those things, which I hope we're doing here at Major Spoilers. Certainly, we've amassed a large following of awesome people like those of you who are watching live, or maybe those of you who are watching in the replay. I thank you for taking the time. Hopefully, the things that I've talked about, I mean, this is 30 minutes. When I do this discussion with my students, this is a week-long series of lectures about how do you make money. And I actually spent some time this week because one of my students wants to be a social media influencer, and we looked at all the ways that he was missing opportunities. And so now he's starting to work and shift his way into taking some of those missed opportunities and making them opportunities for very little additional work to see how it's going to pay off. So I hope that this answers your question. I hope you guys found this information useful, or at least food for thought. And I think that's where we're going to wrap it up this week. One Question Friday. I like this. I like the One Question Friday. I think, depending on... There was another question in the Finally Friday Discord chat room that was really good. That could have been the second contender. If Ashley is back next week, which I don't know if she'll be back next week because she's over at the London Comic Expo or whatever it's called. My guess is she'll be back midweek. Then she'll probably need some days rest. I don't know if she'll be back next Friday, but if she is, I think maybe both of us can share our thoughts on another question from the Discord. And then get back to our regular shenanigans the week after that. So thank you so much, everybody, for checking us out this week. Thank you for following along with us. You can see all the ways that you can follow us above there. Of course, if you found some value in this information, consider becoming a patron. Patreon.com/Major Spoilers. $5 a month. That's all we're asking. $5 a month. If you can swing that, unfortunately, Olin can't because he's going through some tough times financially. Believe me, I understand that. But if you can afford $5 a month, $1 a week, $1.50 a week, we would greatly appreciate it because it helps us grow and helps us continue to do more things. If we had 10 times the number of people all at the $5 level, we'd be doing some amazing things right now. So something for you to think about. Until next time, when it's finally Friday. Take care, everyone. Let's look at some of those fine people. I love seeing Carl there, and Casey, and Kevin, and Matt, and Michael. Oh, there's Nick. Hi, Nick. There's Olin. Gonna have to take his name out. Nah, we'll leave it up there for next week. We like Olin. Olin's a good person. How do we know Olin's a good person? He's a patron. He's been supporting us for years, just like all these other fine folk. You can see your name up here. Head over to our Patreon page. Patreon.com/Major Spoilers. IZM or ISM. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joel. And Joey and John and Johan. Liam Dally. Mario Imalba. Moosenstein. Thank you. Ray Grinley. Thank you so much. Richard, same. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Russell. And Sam and Scott. Seamus. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Lagnus. Have a great weekend. Tim and Todd and Tom. VCL 134. And, of course, Zombie Face. Take care, everybody. We love you.